You're in the water loop.
Waterloop. This is Waterloop episode number 129, Toledo's turnaround from toxic algae. In 2014, a toxic algae bloom in Lake Erie forced the shutdown of Toledo's drinking water system, cutting off the vital service for 400,000 people. In the years since, the City of Toledo responded by forging partnerships to monitor conditions in the lake, investing in upgrades to infrastructure and water treatment, and communicating in a transparent and comprehensive manner with the public. The lessons learned and level of preparedness is discussed in this episode with Patika Banister, Commissioner of Operations for the City of Toledo Department of Public Utilities. Patika also explains how water managers from around the country and the world often consult Toledo about how to deal with toxic algae blooms, and how the experiences shaped her perspective as a water leader. Before starting the conversation, a few quick reminders. Waterloop is a nonprofit media outlet that depends on a variety of support. That includes you as a listener. If you value Waterloop's content, consider making a contribution through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/thewaterloop. Waterloop is made possible in part by a grant from Spring Point Partners. Waterloop is also sponsored by Hydroloop, a company that is revolutionizing gray water recycling in homes and businesses. I'm going to share a bit more about Hydroloop and then start the podcast. Waterloop. Our water supplies are stressed like never before, and it's time for innovative solutions, including in our own homes. Water recycling is the most efficient and affordable way to use less water, and the easiest way to recycle water is to clean it right where it's used. Think about all the water used in a home just once, in showers and laundry machines. It's called gray water. What if that water could be captured, cleaned, and used again? That's how nature does it. Now Hydroloop can recycle 85% of in-home water use. Hydroloop is a breakthrough technology for water recycling. It produces water that is clean, clear, safe, and disinfected. Then that water can be used again in the home for toilet flushing, washing machines, garden irrigation, and more. With Hydroloop, you can use water twice. Learn more at hydroloop.com.
You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop. Here for this episode with Patika Bannister. She is Commissioner of Operations for the City of Toledo Department of Public Utilities. Patika, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for extending an invitation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having this conversation. I've been doing a lot more lately about communities around the Great Lakes and their relationship with water and the challenges and opportunities they have. And you kind of fit right into this there in Toledo. But I want to kind of go back in history a little bit here and get your perspective. And you can explain kind of when you started and so forth. But Toledo really kind of got on the national news back in 2014 when there was a harmful algal bloom that ended up having you had to shut down the drinking water system for the city of Toledo for several days, 2 to 3 days. Could you kind of recount that story of what happened for me, and you can kind of add where you were at the time and when you came into the department there?
Sure. At the time, I was working in our Division of Environmental Services in our water section, which oversees stormwater, wastewater operations, and sampling, river sampling. So we're very involved in water quality issues. In 2014, there was a harmful algal bloom that was in the Lake Erie area, and it just got stuck right by our intake, and water wasn't really moving, and so it sat there for a couple of days, and that's when the state had asked or recommended that we issue a do not drink advisory and recommend that people use bottled water or some water that was prepared. So there was an emergency action that was taken between the City of Toledo and the state and the county and the region, calling in the assistance of the National Guard to help with mobile drinking water to neighborhoods, and bottled water, and was distributed through high schools while the plant was working on the best treatment methods. And then there was a series of sampling that was done utilizing Ohio resources, Michigan resources, and US EPA as well. So that taught us a lot about emergency crisis planning within our utility. At the time, I think our director was about 5 months, definitely less than 6 months into the job.
Oh boy.
Uh, yes.
Yeah.
So, when this all happened, he said, okay, we'll go get the binder with the plan in it. And so we can get started and move forward with our emergency. And said, well, there really is no binder for harmful algal bloom. So that was really kind of the start of our emergency planning, crisis planning and training that we've done here in Toledo since 2014.
Cool. We'll dig into that in a second, but just want to get your personal perspective. This was a pretty big event for a U.S. water utility, right? What was it like just being there when this happened? You're also a resident of the area, right? And so you're part of the community. What was that experience like for you?
Well, for us, the messaging, which was another thing that we can talk about with communication, actually went out through social media, through Facebook, in the middle of the night. So those that were up early Saturday morning had the opportunity to see that there was an issue, and then they ran out and got bottled water. And by the time everyone else got up, a lot of the water was already gone. So, people began to kind of span out into the region to different stores to try to find bottled water. My family actually lives about an hour south of here, and we were planning on visiting. So we went down, and we could see all of the vehicles lined up in front of the big warehouse store trying to buy bottled water. So,
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and retail establishments started having signs out, we're out of water, because, people are rushing in. So, and that's another thing that we looked at after, was making sure that people are prepared beforehand, and not having to be in that panic mode.
Oops, I'll edit that little out. So you mentioned kind of the response, maybe not in that immediate moment, but in the weeks, months, even years afterward. And there's a couple different aspects of that. There's probably things you've done from an infrastructure and a treatment perspective to deal with it, or to avoid that kind of situation. There's probably monitoring and science happening with the lake, so you are better informed as to algal blooms. And then there's training with staff and all that stuff, and comms. So maybe we can start plucking those things off. How are you keeping an eye on conditions in the lake? How are you? What's happened? What kind of systems have been set up on that front?
So actually, before that do not drink advisory, there was plans to build a network for monitoring in the lake, the Western Lake Erie Basin, and they, the contract was all ready to go. So after the do not drink advisory, immediately contracts were completed, and we began working with NOAA and some of our engineering partners here to get buoys out into the lake. And you can actually look up that information on our City of Toledo website during the spring and summer. We pull it out in the winter. But you can see in real time the conditions of the lake, and it provides the basic data, but you can also see a visual of what is occurring. So we now have a network of different organizations and agencies that we work with that communicate constantly. This is what I'm seeing. This is the data that my buoys are pulling out. So it's a lot more organized and better partnerships since the 2014. We also had plans in the works to create a capital improvement program with some upgrades. So, of course, that was fast tracked after the Do Not Drink advisory, and we are in the now we're at the near the end of our capital improvement program, but it's a $500 million project with several upgrades. Some of them are for harmful algal blooms, and some are just were needed to expand the plant and allow for additional time for treatment.
Great overview. When it comes to the buoys and the monitoring and kind of keeping an eye on the lake and the science side, do you guys have partners beyond, the city itself that have kind of helped with that or are part of that effort?
Absolutely. We work with, I always joke that the Department of Public Utilities works with all of the Big Ten. I think we've worked with, between the work that we do on sustainability and climate, and then with the harmful algal blooms, Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin. We gather all those resources. We also work with NOAA on the work out in the lake and the buoy. University of Toledo is one of our biggest partners. They began immediately after 2014, putting a group of professors together from the medical community, the medical side, chemical engineering. We give them free range to come in and do sampling. So they sample. We're working on filters. They've helped us with upgraded filter technology. And so they've been very good partners. Any new and innovative ideas that they have, they bring that to us, and we work on grants. The state has been very helpful, providing us millions of dollars in grants that then we can turn around and provide the technology and the research that we've learned to other communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to ask about that in a second too. From an infrastructure standpoint and a water treatment standpoint, you talked about improvements on that front. What was done with your system to kind of help buffer against this problem and keep it from repeating?
Sure. We have a project management team that is made of several subcontractors, and they really have worked in a short amount of time to make great improvements in our treatment process. We've added ozone. That was added last year. We had a blue ribbon panel of experts around the country that met, and one of their recommendations of the blue ribbon panel included looking at adding ozone. This was a $50 million project. It was, of course, our premier project. And with the work that we were able to do, we were able to use it last season. But I mean, we're really talking about all of these projects, all of this money needed to be done as soon as possible. A short period of time, we have a schedule. And the majority of projects, we're looking at a 12-year schedule. So we're talking about adding new maintenance facilities, adding carbon silos, upgrading our pumping stations, so our large pumps, our basins, all of our basins. We added basically a new plant that was originally designed to be done in the short term. Back in the 50s and 60s, they left kind of a wall that we could break through and add to the plant. But that was done recently, since 2017. We started that construction. And so we've added a whole new section of treatment capacity, 20 million gallons. Again, that assists us in the summertime when our demand increases, that we can do maintenance on any of the other sections in the plant and still have the capacity to meet our demand. Um, so, we've had a significant number of upgrades to our pumps out in the distribution system as well. And so you're talking about some really large projects that need to be completed in a short period of time. And with the expansion of the plant that I just referred to, the contractor completed that just weeks before COVID
Oh,
and the pandemic. And so we were looking at how are we going to continue construction during this time when we're asking everyone to stay at home. And that's when what was already a fast-paced, scheduled tight project started to become a real challenge.
yeah, sure.
When you're trying to reduce the number of people that your plant staff are exposed to, but we have this construction that needed to continue, and you have an extra 250 people that are working, and sometimes in close quarters. And so what we thought was a challenge was nothing compared to when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Big changes to your science and monitoring, big changes to your infrastructure. And so I'm guessing now you talked about going to look for a binder for the emergency plan when this drinking water and do not drink advisory hit. I'm guessing there is a binder now for
Yes, there
for a
is.
plan, right?
Yes. So immediately after, that was one of the first things that we began to work on. And my predecessor, that is an area that was an area of expertise for him, is emergency planning. So he was pulled in to start work on that. His background is working with safety and OSHA programs, and he actually teaches at our local community college. And so we were very fortunate to have him help lead those efforts. We worked with an engineering firm to then start working on crisis planning, not just for a do not drink advisory, but for making sure that we were up to date on all of our planning for electrical outages and natural gas shortages and things like that. So we have those things planned, and then we do training and upgrade our plan every day, or I'm sorry, every year. Then with communication, that was a big piece that needed to be finalized and upgraded as well. And so at the time, it was thought that it was best, and I think this also came from the Blue Ribbon panel, was to create a dashboard. And this gave the community an opportunity to know when we were having issues in the lake versus when we were having issues at the plant. And so we didn't have the hysteria that, of course, naturally occurred after our do not drink advisory, because then there's rumors, oh, I know someone that worked at the plant and they said that we're going to get another do not drink advisory, and then you have another run on the store. Or they would see a city vehicle parked in front of a grocery store, and they would assume that they're there to pick up bottled water, and of course we're going to have another advisory. So that that dashboard was created to it was like a red light, green light, yellow light, to give people an idea of the conditions in the lake and the conditions at the plant. But as time has gone by and we've been able to continue with our social media and our getting our message out there, then we found that there was no need to have that dashboard. And the community is starting to feel more comfortable with our ability to treat the water, especially as we add our projects online, like I mentioned, ozone and additional carbon that we're able to use to treat the water.
Yeah, I was going to ask you kind of what the state of public confidence is in the utility and in addressing these, algal blooms. And it sounds like through years of communicating with them and having this dashboard and being proactive on social media and other platforms, that the public is feeling pretty comfortable with the state of things and with the utility. And I mean, you've done all those upgrades to infrastructure and monitoring and so forth. So I guess they're feeling better about things now. You mentioned also, and I wanted to ask about others coming to learn from what you've done there in Toledo, because these harmful algal blooms, you guys are sitting in a situation at the west end of that lake where you're susceptible to this, but there's other communities out there around the country, other utilities that are, dealing with algal blooms or could be. Have they come to you all to kind of learn on the changes you've made and the response and so forth?
Yeah, you know what? Not only around the country, but really around the world. We've received questions from Asia when they're having issues with algal blooms. We did have a community that was going through an algal bloom on the West Coast, and their first question was, "Can we get a copy of your emergency plan?" And that's what we just talked about, right? And so when you're in that emergency, you want that good resource, and you want to talk to a community that's gone through this before. And so we've share any of our research and any of the work that we have done. And then there's been a few on the East Coast that deal mainly with like lake systems that have had issues with algal blooms, and they're looking at some treatment processes, and so they'll contact us, and we do share and do exchanges. And of course, the western communities in the western Lake Erie Basin, we have some other smaller systems where we're the largest in this area, but there are several other smaller systems that have similar problems. And actually, before 2014, we had a smaller community that had an issue, and had to turn off their system, but they had the ability for some redundancy, and so they were able to switch on another source to give to their community. And so that's another thing that we've looked at, is how to build redundancy within our system. And so that's something that we've been looking at, and really, like as I mentioned in the beginning, my background is environmental science. My degrees are in science, not in engineering, and I do work with a number of engineers. But my focus is also on resiliency, and I've worked with several of the universities in the Big Ten, like University of Michigan, on sustainability issues. And that's one thing that we're really looking at, is in the long term, what are we going to see? What conditions are we going to see in the lake that we need to be prepared for? And again, that goes back to the ozone, looking at that.
Yeah, sure. How have all of this focus, these projects, kind of a unique experience there at your utility. How has it shaped you as a manager and as a leader? How do you think, dealing with this situation, having to be prepared for it, having others look to you for lessons learned and so forth. Yeah, how has that shaped you and impacted you as a water professional?
Really, looking at all the challenges that are in the industry now, you have to have a broader view, not just looking at your utility, creating water, cleaning water, looking at wastewater systems, but you need to look at the long term and then how that impacts people. I mean, we're really in the people business, right? So we are creating a product for public health, which has come out a lot during the pandemic, because in order to wash your hands, you need water. Hospital systems need water. So we need to make sure that we're listening to our customers. We're looking at the long term and building strategies, but also, um, you know, thinking about the affordability and, do we have the ability to um, pay as customers? With all of these projects come with big price tags. They're $500 million projects. So, we try to look for grants and loans because I'm thinking about Mrs. Johnson, who is on a fixed income that doesn't have as much money to write a check or doesn't have any additional funds to help pay for some of these projects. So, really, I mean, trying to reach out to as many resources as we can. You know, Building those networks. That's something that we all have done up here on our as commissioners. We have a commissioner of utilities administration that oversees our billing and our accounting functions, and then another commissioner that looks at field operations, and they are the ones that knock on the door and say your water is under a boil advisory. So what's the best way to communicate that? So really, looking at the people and how our everyday impacts their lives.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific perspective. Love that. I know that you've also participated in this program at Duke University, the Water Innovation Leadership Development Program. Why were you interested in participating in that, and what's the experience been like for you?
At the time that the announcement came out about the program, we were looking at a regional water system and how that would work locally. And so, there were a lot of challenges with that, but we were able to work through them and develop a regional water commission. We were also looking at in the future lead and copper and how that would change our utility, looking at affordability, sustainability, looking at our two plants and the infrastructure needs, and also our field operations and the future needs from there. Our workforce, how we were going to move forward. We had a number of people that were eligible to retire, and how do we bring a new group of people in our region to this sector. And so there were a number of challenges that we were looking at, and this just seemed like a good opportunity to work with the people at Duke, and then also to network with people around the country on a common, both on the West Coast where, they might not have as many water resources as we do here in the Great Lakes, and the challenges that they have and the common challenges that we all have, with the items that I just described, and how we can work through them. So that is what really attracted me to this program.
Mm. And so it seems like that's really been the benefit for you, is getting to learn from others that are in different situations, right? And kind of broaden your perspective or understanding, but then also commiserate over some of the common challenges that you have too, and be able to learn from peers.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that has been one of the greatest assets of the program, and what I've been able to pull from it. And also looking at not just myself as a leader, but how to build up the other leaders around me, and the mentoring, how to be a good mentor, and just strategies for helping the utility move through all of these things. I know there's a discussion that we had recently of how our utility also is a social agency. We also have to be social workers, and how to think in that mindset, and so that, as I mentioned, so that we can help our community. I mean, water really, it's a key to a sustainable community, and it's also an economic driver. If you have the capacity, you have good water quality, you can attract businesses to the area and help build the economy. So, we always make sure that we tell our local politicians that we are the engine to the economics that they're trying to build here locally.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, you've described a lot of different challenges in water right now. You've just described all these different responsibilities that water agencies have. And so it makes sense that there's these kind of programs to help develop leadership and help people like yourself just kind of continue to grow and learn. And it seems like it's really important, again, given how much we have going on in water right now. But Patika, thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing a lot about the algal bloom situation. As a kind of a water wonk myself, I'm interested in learning more about that from the inside. So thank you, and thanks for sharing your story as a water leader.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Waterloop.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and thanks again to Spring Point Partners for grant funding and to Hydroloop for sponsorship. Remember, you can support the Waterloop nonprofit media outlet at patreon.com/thewaterloop. To find all episodes, sign up for email updates, and connect on social media, visit waterloop.org.